Hi, Annabelle. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Splitting Hairs.
Episode 15.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about repertoire yet again, but in a completely different context.
Awesome. So, when to learn it, when to relearn it, when to leave it completely, or even, how about, don't even start it ever? Do you have a piece like that you just are never ever going to play?
Oh, Barber Violin Concerto.
Oh, really?
Elgar Violin Concerto.
Elgar,
Dvorak Violin
yeah,
Concerto. There's some that I'm just like, I'm pretty OCD and I can go through my life going, nope.
You've just decided something.
Yeah.
So your OCD is basically about, this has to do with this topic actually, because I know you. There are certain pieces that you have to learn and there's a certain order which you have to do it in. And this plays into our topic today actually. So the title is When to Learn It, Relearn It, or Leave It. So there's a few issues surrounding that. If we learn a piece of music too early, a lot of bad things can happen in our future. So let's talk about those pieces. Like I know I have quite a few pieces that I learned
we all do.
too early. So let's just get into those pieces. First of all, do you want to go first?
I think I have to. I don't want to mention this one, but I'm going to have to because it's just...
Yeah.
It's
sad. It's sad.
Yeah, mine would be the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, which I did the entire thing.
Yeah, and look, it was a magnificent effort, and there were so many things that hadn't been settled yet in the technique. You know, in the playing, it was nearly, and the thing about choosing a piece like that and then committing to it for an exam is that you can't back out.
You can't back out.
So as it becomes apparent that there are certain passages that aren't going to be right, so you're going to have to go a little bit fakey or whatever. Yeah, it's terrible. Look, it happened to me too in the Brahms Violin Concerto when I'd had a really successful year the year before with the Sibelius Violin Concerto, and I'd done it for my final recital year at the Queensland Conservatorium, and all the teachers came running down the aisles afterwards. Oh, that was fabulous. You have to play the Brahms next. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll play Brahms, whatever. And I started learning it for my concerto the year later, and I just couldn't play it. Like, it was so hard, I just thought I was going to die. And
That's interesting.
couldn't back out of it.
They're both really difficult. You'd think if you can do one of those, I'd say the top three big ones are Tchaikovsky, Sibelius, Brahms,
Yeah.
as far as really
The
that
romantics, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can do one of them, maybe you can do all of them.
So what was it about, let's just skip back to yours, what was it about the Mendelssohn that you just had to play it at that point in your life?
I don't know. I think I was looking at the music going, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. And honestly, it was sheer willpower that got me through that.
Yeah.
But, you're not wrong. There was parts of it where it was just my technique wasn't there yet. So it hindered it. But I remember in that exam, the third movement I got to, there was moments where my friends were listening to it. She's like, all those runs and stuff, I nailed those runs, but there was parts of it that just didn't, get to that same level. So it was just inconsistent.
That's right. Inconsistent levels all throughout. That's right. Some bits worked great and other bits were just nowhere near it. So the best and the worst were so far away from each other. And that's what we're all working towards, is to kind of bring down the best and bring up the worst and have a consistent level so that you can become reliable and professional. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the real thing about it is when you learn the repertoire too early is you're just not ready for it. Not that, you will be at some point, hopefully, but it'll take far longer to get it to a particular playing standard.
Yeah.
Your technique will put up blocks, that you can't get past because you haven't gotten over those hurdles yet.
There's physical hurdles, like actual real physical hurdles.
Yeah. And, if if it's a performing thing, the performance won't sit there properly. So.
Yeah, and there's stamina issues, which is sort of physical plus mental mixed up altogether. There's physical, like if there's tenths or octaves or running passages that go on and on and on. That's like going for a run kind of stamina.
Yeah,
and then there's the emotional connection to it, the understanding of it. Like if you play music too young without any kind of understanding of it, it doesn't always come across that successfully.
I did that for an exam, but it really comes down to just how you pick what music you're going to do. So if we're talking for a uni recital or something, My question is, why did you let me do that piece?
Oh, if anyone out there knows Annabel is probably the most determined, shall we say, that's the polite way of saying extremely stubborn person that you'll ever meet in your life. So look, the reason I gravitate towards Annabel is actually I'm the same. So when I was a student, I played only what I wanted to play. Yeah. And there were some pieces that I'd refused to take to my teacher because I already knew how I wanted it to go and I didn't want their input. I mean, how stupid, how arrogant, how
so good.
It's just ridiculous. So I totally understand your mentality. You just want to do it. You love it. You want to do it. Okay, well, I'll help you. It's your money.
Well, it was through uni, so hey, hex. But I will say though, out of Mendelssohn, it was, sheer determination and stubbornness to get through it. But I actually got really, I improved heaps through that piece. So by the time I got to my next year's uni, I was doing Izai and Paganini and stuff. And, it forced me to get better because I had to do this exam. I know that was on my list of repertoire to do.
That's a really good point, that you got better, but the piece suffered. So... well, I mean, I'm not being mean or anything. I'm just saying the piece helped you get better. The learning of that piece, the process of going through it and getting different techniques happening didn't necessarily work out in that performance moment. I mean, it probably wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, but I'm just saying it was a bit traumatizing. And then you're better for it, but that piece is sort of left by the side of the road a bit injured.
It's a bit injured and it's on the shelf.
And it's on the shelf, exactly.
And I've got to bring back up Mendelssohn later on in this episode. So
So that's when we come to the idea of relearning it. You have to relearn it without all the old bad habits that might have been stuck and ingrained into that piece of music. So when you come back to it, it's really important to consciously bring in every new technique and new way of practicing and playing so that you don't get drawn back into the standard that you were when you first learnt the piece.
What's another piece for you?
Well, I thought it was Saint-Saëns' third concerto, but that's not a fair one to put on the list because I never performed it. So, I mean, not really. I mean, I kind of half did somewhere, but it doesn't count. So I have to think of a piece that was traumatizing actually in the moment. And I'd like to say Elgar, but I had such a great time doing it. But I will say Elgar, and this is another piece which is really heavy on the stamina, like Brahms. It's long, it's relentlessly technical, but it's really deeply musical. So you've got, very, very big concepts, musical concepts to deal with, very big physical effort that you need to learn it, and it's just really hard. So the process of learning it from scratch, for me, I had to be the understudy for Nigel Kennedy, who at the time, I was in Hong Kong Academy, and I was given the opportunity to understudy for Nigel because at that time he was a little bit unpredictable. Like he would pull out of things, he wouldn't show up, or he'd show up 10 weeks late or 5 hours late to a concert. He was real Madonna sort of superstar. So they were a bit worried that the concert wouldn't go ahead. Now, it was just for the Academy. It wasn't like a Hong Kong Phil or anything like that. So I was only understudy for an in-house concert. Anyway, I had a month to learn it. That's 4 weeks to learn this big concerto. And it had never been on my mind before. So I wasn't really that familiar with it. So it wasn't even in my ear that I could just learn it with the help of me knowing it in my ear. I never grew up listening to it. It wasn't one of the concertos that people did for the National Youth Concerto Competition in Queensland Youth Orchestra. It wasn't something people did at Young Performers Award. It wasn't in my ear. So I had 4 weeks to learn it. I think I did pretty well, and the Academy gave me an opportunity to play it with the Academy Orchestra just for an in-house concert because I'd gone, to so much trouble to learn it. I had to use the music. It wasn't from memory, but it was definitely reminiscent of this. I've never touched it since then, by the way, and that's probably 20 years ago. I've played the first bar, maybe. I don't have the music, so it's not something I even want to return to, just in case that frantic 4 weeks built in some, unhelpful habits. Yeah, I haven't even gone back to it. So Elgar, stamina, baby. That's what you need for Elgar and Brahms. So I guess my problem is stamina, and I reckon it's because I've had a lot of physical problems over the years that that have only been made worse by massive, hefty pieces like that. Yeah, so that's my two. I mean, there are probably others, but those, as I talk to you right now about it, I realise the similarities between Brahms and Elgar. Elgar was that big Germanic style composer. Plus, also Brahms, back when I was growing up, Brahms was viewed as heavy 20th century style playing. And already I was realising I didn't want to play like that. So it was a stylistic struggle for me at that time too, because I knew everyone hacks the Brahms concerto like it's just a smash fest the whole way through. But personally, I don't, especially now, I don't think Brahms should go like that. I think Brahms should be a little bit lighter and a little bit more forward flowing. And
do you have a particular recording of somebody that's played it that you like?
No, it's only a fantasy in my head. And when you hear recordings of Joachim and whatever, none of them use any vibrato. Around that early 20th century period, vibrato still wasn't a thing. It just
I know.
wasn't.
There's such an association, and we're not going to. This is going to be a sub-episode, but
yes,
there's such an association with romantic music and vibrato.
Yeah, and it's like such a mythology. It's probably the biggest one. I mean, so it makes it awkward because when you're playing these concertos as a student, it's usually for an exam or a competition, which means you're getting judged usually by people from a previous generation. Yeah. So it's this constant dilemma of, okay, I know how I think I want this Brahms to go personally for me, and with what I know about romantic music, but this panel is judging me. So what can I do? So you're constantly torn. Yeah. You hope the panel's diverse. You hope there's they've secretly planted an early music person on it. Covert operations, early music. So that's that. So when to let a piece go if it's not working? Have you ever had an experience where you've tried a piece but decided, nah, this is too hard?
Yeah. Okay. So all of these ones where you'd say, time to put it down and let it go is, I'd say, if you're in that student phase and your technique's putting up its blocks that you just can't get over. And we had this huge thing when I was, having lessons with you, which was I'd learn a piece, I would improve through the piece, my technique would go, nope, that's where your technique stops.
Limits you.
The limits. So we just got into a bit of an ebb and flow of going, all right, I learned all the way through that piece to that limit and then move on to a new piece and then push through even. So I was improving, but through lots of repertoire rather than hold on to one piece forever and eternity and try and fix my technique through only one piece. I would hammer through all these pieces. And the two that come up that really put my technique at the forefront was Mozart's third and fifth violin concertos. In that order, because I learnt them 3, 5, and then 4. Mm-hmm. And I've always said Mozart is really exposing as far as if you've got any tension in your playing, and I dealt with a lot of tension. So in those little moments where you have like semi-quavers or anything in those classical concertos, for me it's like, all right, it just looks really simple, but it wasn't if you've got the tension in your body. So I performed 3. I didn't perform 5. Or I performed it for you, but I performed 3 in an audition and actually did pretty well on it. But it got to that limit. And so I went, okay, fine, I've performed it. I don't want to hammer this one home. I'm going to move on to 5. I got better through 5, but there was still that technique, like that tension there. So I could only get to a certain point. And then sure enough, now that I've learnt 4's my best one. Yeah. So 3 got me to a certain point. I had to go, okay, fine, put it down, learn another one. Yeah. It's the same technique all the way through. It's just different classical Mozart.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's just my technique grew through 3, grew through 5, 4's my best one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were really smart to start the process of churning through repertoire, because up until that point, you hadn't had enough repertoire under your belt. And what happens is, if you go all OCD over one piece, it can be very traumatizing in lots and lots of ways, physically and mentally. But if you just decide, okay, I'm just going to learn the notes of that one, learn the notes of that one, learn that, and as you said, by the third Mozart concerto, the standard automatically just rises up because you just continually practice these same kinds of techniques without obsessing about the actual piece that you're playing. So that's very mature.
And also, I just happen to now, like, because I've done 3, 5, and then 4, by the time I got to 4, I know the Mozart phrasing really well. I know how I like to play it. I know stylistically about it, so it makes it a lot easier to approach.
Yeah, and you start recognizing similar language patterns in each piece. They're not separate pieces. They're all related because it comes from the same composer who has the same musical language. Yeah.
So Mendelssohn was my traumatizing one, but Mozart was this, and I will quickly mention I did Easy 2 first movement, and the tense in that one was just another technique block that I wasn't quite ready for.
Yeah.
But learning through all that repertoire and learning to just go, okay, I have performed that one and I did perform Easy, and then I'll let it go and move on to other stuff. And that worked for me. That worked for me, right, as you said, to get more repertoire under my belt. But now it's like, okay, I can spend a little bit longer on a piece and really get it to another level, knowing that I don't have those hurdles or as many of those hurdles to
and
get
you won't
over.
be so traumatized by it. You're understanding it's just a simple process of proper practice.
Yeah, and that can only happen from learning a lot, like going through a lot more repertoire and just in general getting better.
Yeah, definitely.
The better you get, you learn how to approach pieces smarter.
Yeah.
Know what pieces would be better to choose. Okay, I really want to play a particular concerto, but I'm holding off. I'm like, no, that can wait. I'm going to do other things at the moment. So
yeah,
you start to just be smarter.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you just mentioned Easy, and that's my next piece that I wanted to talk about. This is a really depressing one for me because I had the time to learn it. I had the opportunity. The motivation was really cool. And yet
the technique.
I found it just too hard.
Which one?
Is it number 5?
Yes.
Yeah. Number 5.
I asked you to learn this one.
You see, I'm blocked about even the number of it. So what happened was Annabel thought it would be really funny for me to document by film me learning Easy number 5. I'm like, yep, sure. I've done 6. I've done the Ballade. I've done 1. I've done whatever. I've done most of them. And the ones I haven't done are actually, they look fine. Annabel decides it'd be really hilarious to document me practicing it, learning it, getting it up to standard, and then doing a performance of it. So I'm like, yeah, great. So I started doing this at the beginning of lockdown. So it must have been March.
Yeah, it was March because I asked you to do this on my birthday.
Yeah, right. So I think, what a great idea. I've got nothing else to do. I'm just getting used to the idea that I don't have to work 24 hours a day and do nighttime concerts. It was really a beautiful time, actually, except for the fear of a global pandemic. The other part of my brain was like, wow, I've actually got the right amount of time to learn a piece properly, which, by the way, has not happened in my life because I've always been too busy. So it was an interesting mental experiment of learning a piece properly from scratch, whatever. There must have been something about the cameras being on that kind of hindered what would be my normal practice routine of getting something from not great to really well learnt in a short period of time. Now, I'm not making excuses, but it came to the point where I learnt the notes, I put all the fingerings in, I was practicing it, and I was practicing it in earnest, and I was videoing most of my practice sessions. But I got this idea into my head that I had to practice in front of the camera the whole time.
Which you didn't, and I told you didn't.
I know, but it was like, well, what's the point of doing it unless the whole thing's documented? So just the fact that it was being documented kind of twisted my brain around in this really weird way. And because of the knowledge that my process was being documented as well, plus the end result, I thought this isn't going to be good enough. And it really hindered my... but having said that, this was in the first half of the year that I was doing it. Then I completely stopped it. I let it go, and you were upset, and I can understand why, because it's, it's a fun... innocent thing for you to want me to do, but it doesn't have to do with you humiliating yourself on film, does it? Right. So anyway, so East Side number 5, take a look at it. Violinists out there.
My 2 cents. Okay, no, well, quickly. The whole idea was, I thought it was like, yeah, a fun challenge, but an earnest thing of like, okay, let's sort of see if a professional orchestral musician can still learn
solo repertoire,
the solo standard repertoire to a high standard, which the answer would be yes.
Well, no,
we know it is.
The answer would be no.
Yes, I know you can do it, because the reality, the answer to the question is, well, you have to learn your orchestral rep. That's your job. You don't, that's the reality of the answer of that whole thing. But like,
I know it was very frustrating for you.
I picked Eastside because I know you'd done 2 and 3 and 6, and it was a style that you know really well. Like I just said, those Mozart concertos. And I know you can do it, and I've heard you play ridiculously hard stuff. So it's just like, and you didn't have to record the whole thing. You were the one that was like, yeah, okay, video. Like, it would have been so good.
I know, and I know you're disappointed by that, but this is exactly what we're talking about in today's episode. When should you leave it? I mean, and it doesn't really matter what reasoning you have. If you hit a wall with it, and if there's not an actual deadline, except a self-imposed one, then deadlines are everything. So because
deadlines go, well, that's it. I have to get it done.
Yeah, there's no way around it. It's like childbirth, actually. There's no way around giving birth. And it's exactly the same with a deadline, except less painful. So I'm sorry about that in front of all these people. I'm very sorry about it, but I don't see myself going back to it.
I still have those videos. That's all I'm saying. Okay. All right. Well, this sort of part we can talk about again, which is when should you relearn a piece, if at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, if you have learnt it young and it went sort of okay, Kabalevsky Concerto for me springs to mind. I learnt it young. Yeah. It was a good time to learn it. I was a bit bad, but I sort of learnt it okay, and it wasn't traumatizing. And then I moved on to another piece. And it was all up to my teachers back then. So I just accepted. There was actually a time that I accepted what my teachers said. You might not believe that, but there was. And I think if I went back to Kabalevsky now, I have to teach it. I have one student doing it. It's fine, and it's fun, and it's a happy, joyous thing. So sometimes it can be okay. Do you have a story?
Yeah, I think the biggest red flag is if you go to relearn things, you've got to be better, much better than what you were, because you've got to put more effort, more conscious effort into going, that's what my technique was like back then. That's the trap I want to fall back into. Better than what you were when you were playing that piece. So Mendelssohn, for me, I have actually gone back. I have gone back over the whole thing. I have gone back and relearnt it. I haven't brought that to you, Sarah, but I have, and it's like, okay, it's there, all those hard bits that I couldn't get, I can get. But it's a lot of effort to go, okay, that's where whether those red flags would come up.
Do you find yourself being drawn back into, that's what I used to do and I hate that? Like,
no.
So the whole thing is just going better now because you've left enough time between.
Enough time, but it is so much more effort. So I think the whole thing is you should learn repertoire appropriately to your technique, and know when to leave it, know when to learn it in general. But if you do want to go back onto a piece, it's got to be so at the forefront of your mind that I don't want to fall into these traps again. And for example, I bought a whole new sheet music of the concerto so that it was fresh music.
Oh, that's fresh eyes. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, so that one for me, so
yeah, amazing. Well, let's just talk briefly about, even though it's not really what we're talking about, how just quickly being conscious about learning a piece of music, practicing in all the positive stuff from the beginning is really important so that you can get the highest possible standard and the best possible practice techniques happening from the beginning of learning a piece of music. Now, you started to do this recently. You started to do this with Rode. I don't want to put pieces into your thoughts, but the Rode study book was a really great opportunity for you to, okay, from the beginning, I'm not going to accept any old habits. I'm just going to build this piece up with all of my new habits and being really conscious about it. Would you say that road was something like that?
Yeah, see, I got a double-edged sword, which is I can learn things really, really quickly.
Yep.
But when I was not as good, I would learn things quickly but skate over a lot of details. So I'd have to go back when I was finishing off a piece.
Right.
So now it was, okay, I can still learn things quickly, but I take things intentionally slower to go, watch that, what's the detail on that bar, what's my tension. So, yeah, road was the example that you and I picked. So you'd stand there next to me in my lesson and go, you didn't do that swell. So go back over it.
Well, that was your idea to actually bring a fresh piece of music to a lesson that you hadn't prepared, and we would practice together. Well, I mean, I wouldn't practice, but I would point out like a coach every little aspect of every bar and what you should prioritize.
Only because I got to a point where I can, go away, learn something, come back, bring it to you, and it just needs your correction of it. And that's good, but at one point it was hindering me because I was missing some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, the goal for any student is to not need their teacher anymore. So if you know how to practice from scratch properly, getting all the detail in the right order, the right set of priorities, the most efficient way of learning it, then you don't need a teacher anymore. You just don't. And that's the goal. That should be the goal for every student, is how can I do this all by myself, getting the best result without having to bring it incessantly to another human being once a week for, the rest of your life,
Yeah.
And I'm actually happy to say that lately Annabel and I have not had that many violin lessons, which, that's...
The last one was like half an hour. I played through Mozart. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's great. It's just so great. I think when that happens, it's not... Some teachers get really stressed, like, oh my God, why haven't they come for a lesson? Not me. It's like, you don't need me? Congratulations. Well done. Well done. So that a piece for me, like learning from scratch really well, it's only ever happened to me once in my life. And that was when my sister and I got to play a double violin concerto concert with Queensland's Camerata Chamber Orchestra. And Richard Mills had written a double violin concerto. He didn't write it for us. It had already been played by Melbourne Chamber Orchestra beforehand. But it was Richard Mills' 70th birthday concert. And we played the Bach double violin concerto and with the Mills. And so, I got the score, I did my practice, and I thought, this time I'm going to do this properly. So every single note that I played also went with the choreography that I wanted to have with me on that stage in the final performance. So there was never a moment that I was playing a passage with a still body or like eyes on the page and not worrying about what my body was doing. I was constantly integrating the movement of my body with the passages and the phrases and the bow direction. And I was totally conscious of it from the beginning to learning it properly. And then Monica and I had lots of rehearsals together where we really went through everything beautifully. It was the first time in my life I felt that I had learnt something absolutely properly from scratch until that day of the concert. And I tell you, it brought it up to a 95. And, we've talked about these percentage rates before in this show. When you practice and practice and practice, you get it 100% at home, but on that stage it might be an 80 or a 70 or whatever. But the way I practiced this one piece, first time in my life, it brought it to about a 95. I mean, 95 is huge for me. Huge. Huge.
I mean, I'm in the process of maybe that's happening for me with one of the works that I picked a new major work. So it's sort of like, oh, okay, if I'm learning it properly, and I know I am, so it's like I hope that one's for me. That I haven't finished it yet, so I can't say that it is or it isn't yet. So
is this a secret? Have you told me about what this piece is yet?
It's the Scottish Fantasy.
Ah, I just screamed. I really like that piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a secret. It's just I haven't had a lesson on it at all, so I'm seeing how far I can get. But I'm doing the whole make sure things are properly done, and I know that I can do things well when I get it what I call play-throughable in a very short amount of time. And I'm up to 3 out of the 4 movements.
Excellent, so, fantastic. So what we've got to remember, just some overall points for this episode. It's all about overcoming the same obstacles that you had when you were younger, because those obstacles are still going to be there, but we just need to get more variety in our practice, more tools that we can use to solve problems without help all the time, without constant help. letting go of that perfectionism idea of, oh, I can't move off this piece until it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, that was me.
That was you, and it's not you anymore, and you can see the value of changing that attitude a little bit. So they're my little 3 cents.
I would say when you say variety, that's a great word. Variety in how you practice. So yes, maybe you want to, like, for just a quick example, metronome on, then turn it off, and then try something different. If people practice in rhythms or something like that, if you've practiced a certain way, try and do the opposite of that.
Absolutely.
Variety in your practice, you know? And I would say variety in your repertoire. I did back-to-back classical Mozart concertos to the point where I was going, I need something else. So I picked some Baroque music and I've picked some romantic music. So try not to get stuck. If you are only a romantic, you love the romantic era, that's great. But you want to broaden and, you know, you're playing, you want to get some variety in it. Pick something else. Just pick something else. So that's really important. I remember I came to you and I was just like, I can't. Mozart's great. Okay, great. It's classical. Love it. I need something else.
Yeah, but you've always controlled your repertoire a bit more than the average
That's because
student.
I've always asked you, what do you recommend? You're like, oh, whatever you want.
Yeah, but that's because I know that if I tell you to do something specific, you're more likely to say, no, I'm going to do something else. And that's called something, oppositional defiance disorder.
Okay. I agree with you.
She's not that bad. She's not that bad. All right, good. I think that's a pretty nuanced episode, but it is an important one for violinists, for any musicians to...
So,
yeah.
When should you learn it? When your teacher says so. When should you relearn it? When you're that good. And when should you leave it? When you just can't play that bar in tune. If it's not happening, move on.
Absolutely. Here. Love that. All right. Have a good day. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Splitting Hairs. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and if you're listening on one of the audio-only platforms, jump over to YouTube where you can see more content and what we look like.
I'm the young one. Like, share, and subscribe. And we have all the social medias like normal people, so go and follow us there as well.
Awesome. Okay, bye.
What's up? Bye.